Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 328, and it's June 5th, 2024. My name is Jason Neiffer. I am the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is the Montana State Virtual School located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in the heart of Western Montana, Missoula. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer.
Good evening, Jason. I'm excited to be joining you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am on summer holiday as a STEM and media literacy middle school teacher at Providence Day School. And we're eagerly anticipating the return of our youngest child this Sunday, who's finished her first year at the Air Force Academy. And actually, also then a family reunion up in Minnesota. Too bad we can't just kick it west a little ways to Montana. We're going to be halfway there. So anyway, yeah, excited to be here tonight and get to talk about the technology news, which we're kind of every other week for a little bit. So the articles stack up.
Yes, they do. And man, it feels like that if anything, the pace of the technology news is increasing, which I didn't honestly think 6 months ago was possible. But Dr. Fryer, what is it that we do here at the EdTech Situation Room?
Basically, we rant and analyze articles to broaden, hopefully, at least our own perspectives on where the world is going with technology. But no, officially, we are analyzing the recent technology news headlines through an educational lens. We have had a variety of educational experiences in our lives and have different roles, but really do enjoy educational tech, but definitely think quite a bit about the impact that technology trends, tools, platforms, all of these things are having on schools and are likely to have on even our society more broadly, especially as we talk about AI. And as I saw the links that you had put in tonight, it was basically just the AI category. That was it. So
yeah, we had some leftovers we didn't get to last time around, and there's just so much going on in the space. And I can't believe I'm saying this because it wasn't true the previous like 40 episodes, but we probably need to cover AI a little more deeply the last time around. So much interesting stuff going on. But why don't we start off AI tonight, Dr. Fryer? Do you have anything in particular you'd like to start with from the articles you dropped into our links, which you can get at edtechsr.com/links?
Well, I think I'm going to defer to you. I'll give the overview because we've got our subcategories now. There's so much AI. So we have AI hype, AI learning, AI advertising, AI elections, deepfakes, not deepfakes, pause, and media literacy. And then I threw in a few articles we may not get to under social media, esports, video games, miscellaneous, and then our geeks of the week. So let's see. It's been a while since I don't know. Do we want to start with Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah.
I can do that one. Or I don't know. That one may be yours. I think it
is mine, but I think we'll both have probably a lot to say about this. So this story's been well covered in the national media. And I will say that I was surprised and actually happy that the national media covered this story as deeply as it did, because I do feel like in partial deference to the, I think, confusion some people feel about artificial intelligence, a lot of the national news media is well short of what I would consider to be full coverage. And that's part of the problem right now, right? But a couple weeks back, when OpenAI announced all their new tools and their new model, which is available for free for everyone, one of the things that was featured was a series of additional voices available so you could have an interactive conversation with the models. And one of them that was released sounded suspiciously like Scarlett Johansson. And the reason why that's interesting in this context is because she voiced the artificial intelligent agent in the 2013 movie Her. And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's actually a pretty good movie to watch. It's taken, I think, increased poignancy in the AI era, and it didn't seem all that far-fetched to me back in 2013. It seems dramatically less far-fetched, despite in 2024. But in that movie, There's a couple things going on. First, everyone has high-waisted pants, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. That's apparently the fashion trend that they expected right now. But also, Joaquin Phoenix plays a gentleman who is going through a divorce. And I actually rewatched the movie last weekend, in part because I wanted to take a fresh set of eyes at the film. But Joaquin Phoenix plays a gentleman who is getting divorced. He downloads an operating system to his phone that's supposed to be the first like socially intelligent operating system, and basically it creates a AI chat-like experience where the AI will talk to him interpersonally and analyze his email and do chores for him and otherwise engage. And in the process of going back and forth with the AI, who names herself Samantha, he falls in love with the AI agent on his phone and then begins to openly date his AI, as it's termed in the movie. And there are several implications to that until the end of the movie. Actually, I won't give a spoiler alert here. So that's as far as I'll go in case you haven't seen the film. So the voice sounds suspiciously like Scarlett Johansson, right? Like to a point to where it sounds like the kind of flirty, giggly voice that Scarlett plays in that film. And 24 hours before they released the new models and the new voices, Sam Altman tweeted out, sharing a tweet about the new features, her, like the title of the movie. So that was weird enough, right? Whatever. Well, a couple days after they released the voice, and it sounds suspicious like Scarlett Johansson, Miss Johansson took to social media and explained that she was approached by OpenAI in hopes of using her voice. They would license her voice in this way. She originally said no. And then like a couple days before they released the new voice option on ChatGPT, they approached her again and said, please, would you please do this with us? Would you please reconsider your no? And she says, nope, I think I'm good. And then 24 hours later, they release this new voice that sounds suspiciously like Scarlett Johansson. Now, there's been a lot of reporting since then, not the least of which there is an actress that they did base it off of, and according to internal documents that were obtained by, I think, the Washington Post, that they developed it separately and didn't use her voice to train it. But it's created all sorts of hubbub and hand-wringing about this particular issue. So that's a lot of me talking. Dr. Fryer, where are you at on this so far?
Well, it was just weird for Sam Altman to, joke in this way after he had been formally turned down, by Johansson. I just think is it tone deaf? I mean, it does not. Initially, I think Altman came across, at least to me, and I think others that we've been sharing and reading, as pretty savvy in the way that he courted legislators, the way that, he presented in Washington, D.C., very different from the tenor and tone of the other, heads of Google and Amazon and Facebook, Meta, et cetera, that were just sort of grandstanding opportunities for legislators to sort of lambast big tech. I think this was really tone deaf on his part. And I think that respect for copyright and the importance of not only creators being able to earn money, but just being treated with respect and being part of the conversation and not just being ignored in a very tone deaf and frankly completely insensitive way. So I just think that on a personal level, Altman really disappointed with the way that he handled this. And I think that, we discussed a little bit the Hollywood writers' strike, and my wife and I were commenting. I think that maybe there are a few movies that are good. We just heard a preview for this Ezra film, and maybe there are going to be some good things that come out. But we were sort of lamenting, like, what's going on with Hollywood, right? Why aren't there great films? And some of that has to do with the writers' strike. And a big holdup for that was, the companies wanted to have unfettered control and usage rights of actors and actresses' voices and likenesses so that as AI tools mature, they can do whatever they want and not compensate these creators and these artists. And so I just think that the conversation around copyright is complex, it's nuanced. I am not of the opinion that to use any of these tools, for instance, a generative AI image creator like Ideogram, which I'm completely in love with, and I'm now subscribing to, by the way, to the tune of $20 a month for like the second tier level. I don't think that's completely immoral. There are people who say that, and I think we need to listen to those perspectives and those voices and think about these issues. And I just, Altman really came down a few notches in my own personal appraisal of him, I think, as a human being and as a tech leader.
Well, and I think that's a very good way of putting where I think most of the reaction was. And I can't remember if this was Hard Fork or another podcast I listened to, but one of the things about Sam Altman and the reason why his firing in the end of 2023 was such a surprise to a lot of folks was that his public persona has been that he's the reasonable voice in the room, right? Like, yes, this technology's cool, but the reason why that I don't have any financial stake in this, I just get a salary and that's it. I don't have any stock options or any ownership. The reason why he had pitched that was such a good thing was that he didn't want a financial interest in the development of these tools as to not create some kind of a financial incentive for him to put ethics well below profitability. And that's a problem that he seems to having some strikes against him in regards to that. And we have another article today that talks about the culture inside of OpenAI and also inside of Google DeepMind is apparently very, very profit driven, even though the outward perception is, future of humanity, these tools will help us all and we're going to make them right and yada, yada, yada. And I think that gives me pause, especially since one of the things that I have thought over time is that at some point there will be additional competitors to ChatGPT, and Claude is pretty good. I probably would go with ChatGPT if I were to choose a subscription. You mentioned Ideogram, which is probably better at image generation than the various engines that OpenAI offers. But the bottom line is that every time there seems to be some competitive models, even Meta's open source model, Llama 3, was seen as a competitor to ChatGPT. And then a couple weeks pass, and then OpenAI blows it away with the next model and increases the amount of free things you could do without paying for an account. So they're the market leader and maybe the market leader going into this first era of AI software. And there's plenty of technology leaders in the past that people had a mixed relationship with. Mark Zuckerberg's an example of that. Bill Gates is an example of that. Steve Ballmer's example of that. Steve Jobs is an example of that. It's up and down the pantheon of tech leaders that have become giants in the last 25 years. Today, it's Elon Musk. It's Jeff Bezos. These are all examples of complex personalities that run these mega companies. And it's, I would say, a bit challenging, to have so many strikes in such a little time for Mr. Altman.
Yes. I think the honeymoon is over with respect to OpenAI and Altman. And, it remains to be seen if meaningful legislation and constitutional legislation can be passed by the United States Congress when it comes to social media, AI. The TikTok bill got tacked onto the funding bill for Ukraine and the Israeli-Gaza war and all that. So, yeah, I think that these conversations are important, and we need to be having these conversations with students. I mean, there's some really outstanding, articles, and some of these, Stefan Bashard, I've got that one in there that you shared. It's so important that we don't wait. I was before the call sharing with Jason that I know some professors who are in departments that have had tenured faculty fired this summer. I heard today from a friend about a private university that's closing this summer. there was an excellent article that I read on Substack this morning by a Tennessee professor who was being fired as a tenured professor. And, the impacts of change, and it's complex. There's a whole lot of things, and I'm not saying this is AI. There's other things going on, but we have just got to change. And hey, thank you for being here with us on the EdTech Situation Room, because part of what Jason and I enjoy doing is trying to read and listen and perceive these kinds of trends and things that are happening within our world, and think about how we need to change. And one of the ways we've got to change is we need to be playing with the tools. We need to be using the tools. We need to be talking to others about the tools, and we need to be considering the ways in which they can or can't, should or shouldn't be used in our professional domain, personal domain, with students. And make no mistake, students are and will be using these tools. So it's such an imperative, and I'm afraid that a lot of folks are just they're not even going to the parade. They're staying at home and just tuning it out, or I don't know, maybe not. But yes, it's good we're having these conversations, and we need to wrestle with these things.
Yep, absolutely. I do want to. We've talked about this, so the headline itself is just the story. But the Washington Post, exactly how stupid was what OpenAI did to Scarlett Johansson, and that's exactly the point, right? That if it's true, and to be clear, I'm open to the possibility that this is all mega hype, right? In fact, I've seen several articles in the last couple months that talk about things like, this is another silly fad like NFTs and cryptocurrency. I agree that NFTs were a silly fad. I'm not entirely sure that cryptocurrency should be dismissed as a fad yet. I also think blockchain shouldn't be dismissed as a fad yet. But I honestly don't think it is. And one of the ways that I'm affirmed by that is because Dr. Fryer also sees this too, right? And we've been around for a little while, the two of us. We've seen trends come and trends go. I know that actually, I think when it comes to prognostication of what's actually going to make change, I think that Dr. Fryer and I have pretty good track record on prognostication for that. And I really do think this is going to make a really huge difference. So, when someone says that, and the next article I'll go to, this is from Reuters yesterday, the headline's OpenAI and Google's DeepMind current and former employees warn about AI risks. Several employees have, I believe they put together a letter, kind of a whistleblowing letter, and they minded for those that are current employees, minded their contract restrictions about what they could talk about and what they couldn't. But they said that there is a lot of problematic ways that these companies are approaching this, that it was a group of 11 current and former employees of OpenAI and one current and another former employee of Google DeepMind said that the financial motives of AI companies hinder effective oversight. We do not believe bespoke structures of corporate governance are sufficient to change this, the letter argued. And I have to say that, you couple this with the revelations about Mr. Altman and the fact that, remember, we talked about it on this podcast, that Google at one point, shelved a bunch of tools, although they also fired their AI ethicist at one point a couple years back. But, Google was scared of this technology and shelved a lot of it. But now that there are several other competitors, not the least of which is OpenAI, Facebook, and the dozens of companies that are releasing models, they seem to be, all steam ahead. So any thoughts on that, Dr. Fryer?
I don't know if we have the article in the doc, but one of the revelations that's happened in the last couple of weeks is that one of those original board members of OpenAI who voted to fire Altman has finally come out to speak. Now, it's unprecedented as far as I know what the OpenAI non-disclosure agreement and non-compete agreement, all the things that there's acronyms for those things. But basically, these folks have been threatened with losing any of their vested stock that they have, which is like huge. That's almost like saying we're going to take all your retirement funds away if you criticize our organization. And so those things have been challenged. But anyway, so I'm not going to have her name. Maybe we can pull up an article and share that. But what she said basically in the article, and then I think a podcast that I listened to, the reason that board was founded was so that OpenAI would remain open. It wouldn't just become a corporation. This is something that Elon Musk had talked about and been upset about. And I'm not one at this point to really, take Elon's side, but it really sounds like this. I mean, these were the facts that they were trying to create this as an organization that was not just going to be another corporation, and it was going to try to create AI for good. And it wasn't going to just let the financial incentives, rule its decision making. And so the board, this is unbelievable. She says they did not know that ChatGPT was going to be announced before it was announced as the board, and they were surprised by it. So again, I think we had this real honeymoon with Sam Altman, and he just seemed like this real savvy and down to earth and willing to explain and sit down CEO, maybe a different kind of CEO. And I think there's just been a real dark side revealed with those agreements that did in terms of privacy employees. They could just understand why they haven't been as many people speaking out. And then, not telling the board that you're going to announce, ChatGPT, 3.5 or whatever when it was announced. It's just really surprising. So how does this impact education in schools? Well, we are going to have to, I believe, decide what kinds of AI tools are we in schools going to endorse and utilize. I think that's probably going to mainly follow what kinds of tools we're already paying and using for. So if you're a Google school, you're very likely to go with Gemini. If you're a Microsoft school, you're very likely to go with Copilot. I am not aware personally of any schools that are licensing ChatGPT for teachers to be able to use. It may be that, as it happened this past year, it's just on us as individual educators if we're going to pay for any pro models. But of course, the thing is, ChatGPT-4 Omni, which is the latest version, is now completely free. And if you use it a lot, it's worth paying for. And you want to make custom GPTs that you save, it's worth paying for. But you can utilize that for a small number of queries, and you're using the full, quote, frontier model. You're not using the older model. So anyway, it's just, and then the whole thing about kids and how old and all of that stuff, there's a lot of things that need to be worked through. But I don't think that that OpenAI did themselves any favors with the way, from a PR standpoint, they did the rollout of this latest model. And most of the news that we're hearing right now is pretty negative. So I will also say that I'm paying for two models. I'm paying for ChatGPT Pro, and then I'm also paying for Ideogram. And because I'm actually teaching, I should have shared the link. I could, I guess, sharing a 2-week part 2 of my Teaching the Conspiracies certificate course through the Media Education Lab. I'm teaching that in July, and it's about political polarization. It's about conspiracies. It's about both historical and contemporary conspiracies and the ways in which social media is weaponized as a propaganda tool to try to not make friends and influence people to win elections and trick folks. And so anyway, what was I going to say? I just totally lost my train of thought. I think that's going to start happening to us a lot, Dr. Neiffer, as we get older.
Yeah, I think it's already happened to me too.
We can just do hand signals. So, just like debate, you can just go like this. Stop
I would just have one other thought to that, to say that, the problem we're running into too is that, like, even if your school has the foresight to adopt one of these tools, which I don't think is the worst idea, this is what I kind of feel like in regards to, I don't know where Conmigo will go, right? It's a decent tool. It's more decent now that I'm paying $4 a month for it, as opposed to the $10 a month I was paying for it originally. But it's very smart, actually, about trying to limit what students can do with it, which I think is an enormously wise strategy, because we don't want kids just putting in their homework and having it spit out answers, right? But at the same time, it does not matter if your students have access to better technology on their phone. And I just keep thinking about, schools that, have either labs or one-to-one initiatives, but their hardware is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Like, even if you really well maintain that lab, it's a good chance that most students have better stuff sitting in their backpack or pocket than you do for your lab. And, and again, I get it. It's complicated. There's money issues. There's 1,000 reasons why that might be the case. But, I think luckily, teens and 20-somethings are kind of cynical about this technology. And that's kind of a break, I think, for schools, because it's going to give us slightly more time than the incredibly fast way that this technology is moving. And that it gives us an opportunity. I wish I had good answers to this, right? Like, and I think I've said this a couple of times now. It's just so weird to me that the same people that are so disgusted by AI seem convinced that you can detect it, when all of the detailed research on this, including things like blind testing readers, suggests that that's just not the case. But to be clear, I wish there was a way to detect it. I would like to be able to know if what I'm reading is AI. But the bottom line is there's nothing all that consistent about these measures. And so, again, it's a complicated era. You mentioned all the other cruft that's going on in education right now, which is certainly of concern. But the bottom line for me is that this is a weird era that we're wiggling our way into, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down in pace.
I am tempted. I'm not saying that I'm going to do this, but I am tempted to do a presentation. This could be a book. This could be a lot of things. Saying your homework assignment is irrelevant. And I know this would just get a lot of people angry and upset. I watched a interview with Kai-Fu Lee, and I'll put the link in. It's from Fortune magazine on May 23rd. The headline is about 50% of jobs will be displaced by AI within 3 years. At the end of this, Kai-Fu Lee, who is one of the foremost entrepreneurs in China and is developing and deploying the AI tools that are directly competing with all the US, AI companies, says that, it is not cheating to be using ChatGPT any more than it's cheating to use Photoshop or to use Grammarly or to use spell check or these other kinds of tools. These are algorithms which are designed to enhance our productivity and our communication skills. But AI is such a radical leap forward that I wonder, and maybe somebody could do an analysis of this. If you took the homework assignments in a given mathematics class or a given English class, how many of those homework assignments and projects and tests could be fully completed by AI? And I think my point would be, if your assignments can be simply plugged into an LLM chatbot and the answers can be created, then that assignment is essentially useless for students. We need to be having, students debate things. We need to have them. I think there's a great case for bringing debate into the mainstream of education. Have a cross-examination, be able to explain, be able to demonstrate, and be able to utilize. We need to be doing things in multidisciplinary ways. We need to stop teaching in isolation. And the sooner we can embrace the uses of these tools, the more relevant we can make the learning experiences or the potential learning experiences that we provide for students. And we need that. They need that. Our society needs that. And I think there's such a wide gap here that we're going to have a number of years, including this one right now, the school year that we're about to start, where there's just going to be a heck of a lot of teachers that are going to be fighting the tide and administrators trying to say, don't use any of these tools. Let's do education like we did in 1855 or whatever. Maybe it's not that bad in a lot of cases. In some, it is. And so I just think that's really unfortunate. I'll put a link to this this YouTube. This is really a pretty mind-blowing video. And I think listening to folks like this that are so knowledgeable about these AI tools is a really, really good thing, because it can really push our thinking. And I think that's what we need. I used to joke with Miguel Gulin about people that set themselves on fire to, draw a crowd. I don't think we need to provoke people unnecessarily, but I do think that there's some real immediacy to this. And I think a lot of people are acting like they're asleep and they're just going to still teach like they did last year. And I don't think any of us should be teaching like we taught last year in the world of AI.
Yeah. And I would even go a step further to say that denying its existence or like passing it off as either a fad or something that it will not have impact, or it's easy to dismiss or ignore, also means that you may not know what's going on in regards to what's going on in your own assignments in classrooms. And at the same time, we have college professors reporting that it's the lowest function students they've had in their career. There's still skill gaps and social emotional learning gaps and all these pieces. And I'm not saying that all these things are equally true, but at the same time, this certainly requires a lot of attention.
I've got a quick one that's kind of mind-blowing. Do you know about Dan, Do Anything Now, and jailbroken ChatGPT?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a podcast from June 4th on the BBC Sounds Tech Life, and it's called Dating a Chatbot. And it is a report basically coming, from Britain, from the BBC, but coming out of China, talking about this version of ChatGPT, which is called Dan, Do Anything Now. And it is a quote jailbroken version. And I've got I don't know if this is there's a link to this on GitHub gist. I don't know. I'd never heard of this before. Please listen to this podcast. I would just encourage people to do that, because I think that we underestimate the power of the virtual. And they talk in China about how it's but right now they have record low numbers of folks getting married. They have a record low birth rate. And according to the women who are interviewed in this episode, a lot of times some men in China will treat women in a very sexist and misogynistic way, and basically not be good listeners and good partners. And so these chatbots, which are being trained by others and which people can train themselves, are proving to be much better companions than real people. And people are having AI companions as their first boyfriend. And it is really mind-blowing. And I know that this stuff is on the edge. Like, I don't think 50% of the kids walking into our classrooms, in August or September are going to be using AI companion chatbots. But the pace of this, and then also, I don't know, man, this is a mind-blowing thing, which can take us a whole bunch of different directions. But of all the media that I think I've consumed in the last 2 months, that podcast, or not 2 months, 2 weeks, that podcast probably blew my mind more than anything else. That the Kai-Fu Lee video was really good, and then this podcast was as well. And doesn't that also speak to us something about how much media are we using in our classes? I'm sure in the Digital Academy, you all probably integrate a lot of video, a lot of podcasts, a lot of media. That is not the case in all classrooms. And I think there's just so much that we need to be learning today that has not been written down in a textbook. So anyway, this is probably disjointed, but that is a great and mind-blowing podcast. And Jason, do you know, other than the This Week in Tech, when they had the Amy Webb and the Dig Nation guy on. They talked a little bit about it. I just haven't read a whole lot about these companion chatbots, and I think it's probably, I'm sure it's a rabbit hole that we could go down. But
yeah, I have read quite a bit about it, and in fact, I've been asked about it a few times too by teachers. So I think I've had 3 or 4 questions now. I've given 25 or so presentations across the state of Montana in the last year and a half, and I've gotten that question a couple of times because there are students usually below high school, so we're talking about below ninth grade here in the state, that have said that they have AI boyfriends and girlfriends. And in fact, my sister, who is an interventionist in Oregon, is asked me, pretty point blank, can you have an AI boyfriend or girlfriend? And I said, well, I mean, what it is in the eye of the beholder, of course. But the bottom line is that, yeah, I mean, and there are dozens of apps. There used to be just a handful of them. And I kind of remember it was like a New York Times article or Washington Post article. There was a lot of funny business-wise last year, because one of the prominent apps charged, like $100 for a year's worth of Supreme service, which included, a bit more risque chat, if you will. And then that app shut down. Actually, that app went through a number of different controversies. They took the kind of naughty talk out, and then they brought it back in again. And then they paid all this money, and eventually what happened was that the app shut down, or the app didn't shut down. It got sold to another company who stopped paying attention to it, and then the almost the same version of the app appeared a couple weeks later with the same functionality as the app that shut down, but then wanted you to charge you $100 again for a year of service. And a lot of people reported being soul crushed by it, because they had developed an emotional attachment to this AI personality.
Hard Fork, the podcast that Jason and I both pretty much religiously listen to now about AI every week, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, had the CEO of one of these companion chatbot apps on. And that was an eye-opening app. This China one, they play, because this has gone viral on whatever the TikTok is in China, recordings of this. And the responses, the zero latency, the quality of the voice, but also just the wittiness and the humanness, it is unbelievable. I mean, it really pushed my boundary of what I would have considered to be possible. So if somebody's to ask me, is it possible for somebody to have an AI boyfriend or girlfriend? Yeah, absolutely. It's happening now. And as they talk about in that BBC podcast, while there's not obviously physical contact yet, that's the movie Her, right? I mean, Her does not seem like science fiction that's too far away yet, or now. I mean, it did a year or two ago, but now it seems so like it's happening next year, kind of thing. And as I played that podcast episode for my wife today, when we were out and about, doing some errands. And what she's a real Star Trek fan, and what she recognizes is that's where we're headed. It's the holodeck. It's the world in which you can create whatever kind of scenario you want, and it's going to have VR, so you're going to be able to see it, and you're going to be able to experience it certainly through your eyes and your ears. And the brain is an amazing, amazing thing. And so anyway, I don't know, this is one of those things probably that we can do a lot of hand wringing about, but I think part of what we've got to do with these trends and what's happening here is we need to talk about it. We need to do some hand wringing. We got to process it. I mean, that's part of what we end up doing here is we process some of this stuff, which is helpful, right? Because when you read an article or listen to a podcast, see a video, how do you appropriate the ideas there, connect them to other things that you've thought of before and heard of before? How do you make sense of it and make meaning of it? You have to process it. So I recognize that we're just doing, maybe it appears or sounds like we're just doing some hand wringing about this, but okay, let's bring it to the practical level. You said your sister's an interventionist and she's asked you about it and she's become aware of it. I don't know how aware the counselors at our school are about this, right? No, I don't think 50% of the middle school, high school kids are going to walk into our classrooms next year and say, hey, I've got an AI, significant other. But it's very likely that some may, and it's on our landscape, and it's something that's so powerful. And again, it's being shared on social media. So I don't know if this is on TikTok or, the social channels those kids are on these days here in the United States as it has in China, but that potential certainly exists. So don't know what we're going to do with that today. I don't think I'm going to be signing up for any of these, but it's something we certainly need to be aware of. And we need to, ultimately we need to be equipping everyone to hopefully make good choices.
Yeah.
And the level of choices, because here's another aha. This is when I lost my train of thought. It's amazing to me how Ideogram does not have the same boundaries and guardrails that ChatGPT does in terms of polarized content. ChatGPT does not want you or me to create any kind of image that might be polarizing, used in an election, anything like that. They're hypersensitive to that. And for the record, because I know we're being recorded and broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube and archived, I'm not creating any kind of misinformation, disinformation. Some of the things I'm trying to do are create some visualizations about some of these dynamics that are happening with the use of really wild and crazy conspiracy theories, with social media being weaponized, with polarization occurring. And, just as there's different platforms that we can access now, this Dan Do Anything Now version of ChatGPT, like the guardrails that are being put in, I think need to be put in. And if we're going to adopt something as a school, which I think we should, that allows for some use of AI, that needs to have good guardrails. But just recognize, just like kids are on the internet filter when they're at school and they're connected to school Wi-Fi, well, as soon as they're on their own device or they're at home or they're somewhere else, they're oftentimes off the filter. They're going to be outside the guardrails of whatever the AI, developers have created. And so, boy, that is challenging for us, not just thinking about this from a school, an educational perspective, but a societal perspective as well. And, I think we need to just be continuing to work to raise good humans, and folks who are going to make good choices. But because the power of these tools and the options that these tools present are it's hard to come up with the metaphors. The holodeck of Star Trek is one metaphor. There are others. And on the good side, just phenomenally awesome, incredible things that we can do to become more productive and more effective in the work that we have to do, the communication that we need to do, all of that kind of thing. So,
yep, absolutely.
All right. Wow, we've only got 20 minutes left.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I need to go take a nap now, but
let's see. What else stood out for you from some of these past AI articles? You want to point to one, or you want me to pick one?
I threw a couple in today, actually, that I think I'd like to talk about. Perplexity is increasingly a great tool, and I will share in my Geek of the Week. In fact, we may want to spend a couple of extra minutes there today because I've got a couple of great ones. Usually I'm a little more svelte in that, but Perplexity is the AI-generated tool that researches before it gives you an answer. And so it does have the magic that you can treat it just like a chatbot if you want to, but you can also send it out to the web, basically. It searches up 20 or so links and uses that to create your answer. And so it is much less prone to hallucination than just an open chatbot is. However, what I have discovered in my own experimentations in the last several months, that even when you give it material, it can hallucinate, because the bottom line is that the models are pretty amazing, but they're certainly not anywhere near foolproof. But they have a new feature that essentially it allows you to share your results. And so They have created a means now that if you have a search that has results that you want to share, you don't just share like copy and pasting. You can actually share the output from Perplexity, and it creates a page, is what they call it. You enter a prompt in, you click share, and then you can even choose a like who the level's for, beginning, intermediate, or advanced, to kind of aim your content, and it's pretty great stuff. So that's, by the way, this is from TechCrunch on May 30th, and I've played with this feature a little bit, and it's really interesting because I do think I get generally better results from Perplexity.
And what's amazing here is Perplexity is betting and working to supplant Google and Google's model. And this is huge because the millions and billions of dollars that rely upon Google search, which has become really analogous with searching the internet, right? I'm going to Google that. Most people don't say I'm going to Bing that or Yahoo that or Alta Vista that. Perplexity thinks that we are going to, again, like Star Trek, want to say, computer, tell me the origin of Earl Grey tea. And we're not going to want to say, well, there's 10 hits and here's the first one and click on the one you want. You're going to want the answer. And so, again, I think this is a really important tool to play with. I've downloaded the app, but I think it's been so long since I've used it. I think I need to download it again, because the iPhone will whatever that's called when the app basically isn't installed anymore. You have to tap it again. And I think what we've seen with Google is that they have an innovator's dilemma, right? Just like Microsoft with the web and the cloud and Web 2.0 and all this, and their investment they've made in client-side software that was operating system dependent. I need to have some coffee, I think, before the show.
Yeah, aren't you on vacation, man? Come on.
I don't know. I think, my brain's just been too idle. I'm losing the edge, man. Google has the same kind of innovator's dilemma. They have a huge, financial incentive to keep the status quo going, but Perplexity is a challenger along with others that's really saying, wait a minute, we don't think that's the way people in a world of AI are going to want to search anymore. And so that's where Google has come up with these, they're called previews, I think. And anyway, it's fascinating to see this all play out. But again, let's think about the classroom. So here, a student has access to Perplexity AI, and you ask them to, give a report on the planet Saturn or whatever. At one point when the internet was coming, it was amazing to see how much information we could print and bring into the classroom. I remember this in the mid to late 1990s. But now it's going to be much more customizable. And so we've talked for a while, maybe like 20 years, about designing assignments that students can't just Google, right? And things that you can't just Google the answer to. But how do you devise an assignment and activity that you can't AI, to get the solution?
And it's so funny, Wes, because I've heard that one like at least 24 times in the last year. It's like, well, this is why you shouldn't make assessments that you can Google. And it's like, no, first of all, that's an incomplete statement, right? Because it's way more complex than that. But more importantly, it's rendered completely irrelevant in the world of AI, because AI can do assessments that you can't Google, right? And I'm not saying it does them well, but it will get better over time. And the bottom line is that that these tools are pretty good at this stuff, right? And if you have really low-level assessments that you can't, or that you can't Google, like a kind of a worksheet that asks you to, state pretty thinly considered opinions, or really light narrative, AI is going to knock that stuff way out of the park. And there's just no easy answers to this. I really wish there would, but there's not.
Yeah. Are you paying for a Perplexity?
I am.
How many different AI tools are you paying for? Assuming your wife is not going to listen to this, so you may not want to confirm or deny that.
I canceled a couple last month, And so I think I'm down to like 4.
So Ideogram and ChatGPT.
Ideogram, ChatGPT, Claude, and I still have Poe.com, but I think I'm going to get rid of Poe. I got rid of Midjourney. I did subscribe to GPT-0 for a couple months because actually I didn't see him. My colleague Mike saw the creator at ASU GSV or GSV ASU, the conference in San Diego earlier this year, and he was talking about that they're trying to deepen the analytics that it can do on writing for you.
You're talking about ChatGPT?
No, GPT-0. That's
I don't know about
one of
that
the
one.
yeah, it's the detection software that exists.
Oh yeah.
And it's really interesting because of it's not just that they want to try to detect AI writing, which is something that I disagree with them. That's as easy as they make it say, but they also want to say not just that, but show what content it was trained off of, which I think is a fascinating concept. It also provides a plugin that I have turned on right now, which tells you the number of edits in a Google document or an online Word document. So as an example of this, our discussion links, Wes, have had 160,000 edits, since this is half of our document, right? And so, that concept is pretty interesting to me.
And that is an excellent. I don't know if we talked about this on the show, but this is a great specific strategy to think about using with your students for writing. And that where was it? There was something that I think they talked about on Hard Fork where it was ESPN or somebody where they had hired, the document was turned in and they were like, oh, I edited it in something else and I just pasted it into Google Docs. But if you explicitly tell your students, I want you to start with a blank Google Doc and I want you to use the same one for the entire writing process. There is a plugin, maybe it still works, that can replay the creation of a Google Doc, which is really fascinating, especially when you have multiple authors that are contributing to it, and it does it in colors and stuff. But using revision history and trying to have more transparency, because if there's suddenly this huge block of text that just appears, well, where did that come from? And again, I am personally not saying that using AI tools as, brainstorming partners, even as co-writers, I think there's room for a lot of that. But that is a specific strategy that all of us who are Google schools using Google Docs with revision history, that's something that we can use and talk about. And I think that the nuance is going to be, defining what is the acceptable use of AI within your classroom.
Yeah.
How are you going to, are you, and this would be a great survey to do next year. How many of our teachers are outright banning it 100% on all assignments and projects and activities? And then how many are allowing it? And for those that are allowing it, what's the nuance? What are the guidelines?
Yep, totally. That's exactly it. And my program's having this discussion right now. It's not going to happen for every assignment next year, but I really would like teachers to be at the forefront of drawing good thick lines for students. I don't necessarily think that saying no AI forever and ever with this assignment makes much sense, because there are so many what I consider to be quite legitimate things you can do with AI. I think about it from the standpoint of brainstorming or refining your topic or making a topic sentence better. There's just so many ways it can help the writing process. But the bottom line is that it is a titch more complicated than the whole notion of saying yes or no. But I think you have to explain that to students, and I think they'd appreciate your guidance, to be honest.
Is it okay if I do a couple non-AI articles real quick?
Yeah, let's do those, and then we can Geek of the Week it.
All right, so here's some pretty wild ones, but these are worth discussing. This is NPR on June 1st. Display of captured wolf in a Wyoming bar brings outrage. Did you hear about this? Being in Montana? Yeah. So this was really unfortunate. A guy was snowmobiling, I guess, hit a wolf, and instead of either maybe like leaving it or dispatching it and putting it out of his misery. He brings it to a bar, puts duct tape on it, and they take a video, and eventually it's killed. But the threats, the death threats that have come about, not only for him, but for the librarian in their town, and for a fellow who has his name but also lives in Wyoming in another place, like the vitriol and hate and the way in which the internet has really changed, and people are doxing and doing really, really sometimes terrible things, that it's unfortunate, and it's a sign of the times. Under Melissa, because you're a Dogecoin owner, I'll mention this one. This one is under miscellaneous. This is an op-ed, and this is in the New Yorker today. And the title is "What Doge Taught Me About the Internet." And I think that we've said this before, we're not dealing with the internet of 2005. The internet, which a lot of older teachers grew up with, has really changed in some pretty significant ways. This article says that Doge, the actual dog, named Shiba Inu. Well, he's a Shiba Inu dog. Anyway, he's dead. He's passed away.
He passed away.
Right. But this was just a good reflection upon the ways in which the internet has really changed. And I think we need to be aware of this as teachers, and thinking about, again, how we engage students in discussions and conversations about this, and also what we do in our incredibly polarized times. We need to be careful the things that we talk about. So I'm going to be careful as I talk about this, but I'm going to mention this article and encourage people to go ahead and listen. I've mentioned this, I think, to you before, Jason. The Tech Policy Press podcast is really fantastic. And on May 26th, they had an episode called "A Perspective on Meta's Moderation of Palestinian Voices." It is unfortunate that today you have to be so careful talking about anything around the conflict happening in Israel and Gaza, the war, and all of that situation. And content moderation is needed on social media platforms. I think this is an important thing that we need to help students understand, and just people generally in our society. We have confusion over free speech, and this idea by some free speech absolutists that any kind of content moderation is going to be evil and be terrible. But there is a lot of complexity to this, and certainly in the case of the Palestinian-Israeli war that's ongoing, that is true. And it's really highlighted well in that podcast. I'll just do one more, and this one has to do with esports. The article, it's interesting how some articles have a different headline when you look at the actual title of the webpage. So like if you look at what comes up on Mastodon or other social media, this is the headline that comes up, above the page. Lawsuit argues Call of Duty helped cause the Uvalde school shooting. The headline, as you look at the article on Ars Technica from May 28th, is "Families of Uvalde shooting victims sue Activision over Call of Duty's role." And I'll just say that I've had some cognitive dissonance around esports, especially now at the high school level, and school shootings. And there's, research that shows there's not causality for these first-person shooter games, but the article, highlights that basically all of the shooters who did some of these most significant, these most horrific school shootings, had played this video game, and that it arguably had a role in shaping their minds and shaping their behavior. Again, those are some sensitive issues, but I think it's important for us to recognize the world of video games, the world of social media, the world of influencers that students and others in our society are living in the midst of, is something that, to varying degrees, we need to be aware of and be able to engage in conversations with students about, as we try to help them develop literacy skills, as well as hopefully good ethics and good decision-making skills when they face all these tools. I'll be quiet now.
It's Dr. Fryer rent night.
What you got for our Geeks of the Week, Dr. Neiffer? You got more than one today.
Yeah, I do. I've been, in the last 7 days, I've been stunned by two tools. They're both AI-based, but it was worth sharing because of how much possibility they both hold. So the first one is that there are countless numbers of AI note taker apps that will plug into your Meet, your Zoom, your Teams meeting. But the one that was recommended to me by a colleague in Colorado, it's actually the executive director of the Colorado distance learning program that we're partners with. He uses Fireflies, not Firefly AI, which is an Adobe product, but Fireflies.ai, which is a stunningly good note taker in a meeting. And what it does is that it pops up in, you just invite the bot to your meeting, just like you would anyone else. It hops in, and not only does it take really excellent notes, full transcript, it then processes that to do things like, what are action items from that? And I've had it sit in on 3 meetings this week. Consensually, everyone in the room was involved. But for example, my leadership team meets every 2 weeks. And so yesterday we met and put this tool in. And at the end of it, it created a list of action items for everyone in the call. And it was 100% accurate. It was an hour-long call, 100% accurate, and there's a free tier to it that says free forever. I'd be willing to pay for this if it continues to be as good as it is, but it is a truly extraordinary tool and really well designed and really thoughtful. By the way, I haven't talked about this much here, but the last 4 weeks, I tried it a year ago. I couldn't really get into it, and I've really had the need for it lately, but I'm starting to become a huge fan of Notion, which is a note-taking app. Think of like Evernote, but it doesn't suck, I guess is probably the best way of putting it. And it's basically this kind of info dump tool that works on every device, works on the web, easy to share things to. But one of the things you can do with Fireflies.ai is when you're done, you can have it automatically put the transcript in Notion so that you can, in essence, refer back to it later or search for it. And there's an AI tool built into Notion too, but those two things together are pretty darn great. But the other thing I want to point out is probably the biggest rabbit hole I've been down on AI, and that's saying something because I've been down some really deep rabbit holes. There's a tool called Make, and it used to be called something else, but Make is in the kind of genre of the if this, then that genre of tools, which is a shockingly great tool. I haven't used it nearly as much since they started charging money for more than a couple things. I used to have like dozens of active if this then that tools, or I think they call it recipes going. But Make is that, except that it has so much more functionality. And I want to give you the 2 examples I came up with. I think I've talked about a couple of times on the podcast that one of the things I've been doing to try to decrease the hallucination when I create content on AI is keeping a database of summarized articles and research for when I want to, have expertise in the output. And so I have hundreds of pages of training data now from research studies and books and web pages. Well, I created a workflow in Make that essentially anytime I add a web page to this list in Google Sheets, which I can do with an if script that I wrote. So in essence, I share on my phone to if this, then that. It puts the link on the bottom of a Google Sheet, and every 15 minutes it checks for new links, and it takes the web page text, it pulls it into Perplexity AI's API, it creates a research brief for me, and then puts the link of the web page on a Google Doc along with the summary in the format that I gave it, right? So it's like automatically creates this kind of training data out of a link. But the original thing that I used was actually, and I wish I could find this YouTube video so I could give the creator kudos here, but there are literally hundreds of integrations, OneDrive, Excel, Sheets, everything, Notion, there's an integration for. This is how I learned the tool. She helped me set up a script that you put the link on the bottom of a Google Sheet, it pulls it into Perplexity, which creates a summary of that article. It then sends it to ChatGPT to create a tweet. It pushes out over Twitter, right? It then uses ChatGPT to make a longer article for LinkedIn, pushes that over LinkedIn, and then modifies it and sends it out over Facebook. So in essence, you provide a link, and it will automatically write and push out tweets and social media posts. Now, that's dangerous for a variety of reasons, especially if your social media presence is popular or in any way complex, right? Posting something stupid might get you in trouble, but just the power of that and what it has the possibility to do, I think is pretty extraordinary. So that's make.com. And again, I apologize, Dr. Fryer, if I have now kicked you down a rabbit hole, Mr. Summer Teacher there, but I wasted 7 hours of my life to that this past weekend, and I was absolutely enamored.
No, you often enhance my productivity by sharing such tools as this, which are true geeks of the week. I noticed it doesn't look like Blue Sky or Threads are a supported app, but of course Mastodon is, Facebook is, LinkedIn is. I'm thinking about this social media text prepper JavaScript that I wrote with ChatGPT's help, in taking a longer post and breaking it up into threads that are numbered. And anyway, this is really fascinating stuff to think about, the ways in which you'd like to have workflows. It reminds me of Buffer. I'm thinking about, can I do a buffer, with the ways that I'm sharing things and whatever. So cool. Okay. I have created a bunch of public Mastodon lists. I loved my Twitter lists, and so I went ahead and found a way to share these publicly. There is a tool that's called followlists.online. And so, for instance, I've got a media literacy list on Mastodon of 26 accounts, a news list, a journalistic list, and a Yoda's list. And so Mastodon doesn't currently allow you to publicly share those like Twitter does, but you can use a tool like Follow Lists in order to do that. So I made a little web page linking to those. Google has a prompting guide 101. Have you played with this yet or seen this from Gemini?
No.
Okay, so it's just called Prompting Guide 101, a quick start handbook for effective prompts from Gemini for Google Workspace. So I think it's valuable to take a look at the ways in which they are encouraging us to do prompts. For basic parts, you need a persona, or you can ask the AI to have a persona, have it a task. You can give it the context, you can give it the format. And so lots and lots of examples. I think this is a fantastic document. It's 45 pages long, and I have not fully read it, but this is on my to-do list for AI. And then finally, on a personal note, I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, that we've got a family reunion coming up. And my dad and I have started doing some oral history interviews with members of our family over Zoom. Actually, the first one we did was his buddy, Dave Bonner, who was the longtime editor of the Powell Tribune in Powell, Wyoming, where Dad grew up, and friends with Dad since first grade. And it is just so fun. So I've created a little subdomain Google site that I'm building out called basically Fryer Family History. But it's not just my dad's side, it's my mom's side, it's my wife's dad's side, mom's side. So it's the Fryer Henley Ward Lovell Family History. Tomorrow we're going to be interviewing my dad's 92-year-old sister over Zoom. And I just think that it is so wonderful to be able to use these tools during COVID. Many of us got more used to not only QR codes and scanning to look at a menu, but also tools like Zoom and Google Meet and these other things. And the ability to interview members of our family, especially older members, but it can be any member of the family, and get them to tell stories and be able to document that and share that. It is absolutely fantastic. So I have an even more exciting Geek of the Week in my hand right now, but because I think my dad is watching, I will not reveal this one until we come back from the family reunion. But we have gone a little bit over time. So where can people, find?
That's my question to ask
That's
you.
your question. I'm jumping in. I'm sorry. I'm speaking out of turn.
Where can people find you on the internet, kind sir?
Just go to wesfryer.com. I've got all the links there. How about you?
You can find me at aicentrist.com. And actually, I made a change of that. I need to actually finish it, but I'm now hosting that on Canva. which it's stupid simple to host a website on Canva, including adding your own domain to it. And right now it's just mostly a template, but it is a delightful, easy way to make a web page that I think I'm going to go with. So there it is.
Cool.
But this here isn't Canva. It's the EdTech Situation. We're once a week podcast on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, Daylight, whatever time. Sometime in the middle of the night UTC, mid-morning if you're in Japan. If you can't join us live, although we wish you would, you can find our podcast anywhere. Find our podcasts are aggregated. Your favorite podcast has the EdTech Situation Room. But if you can, find us on YouTube or Facebook. Find us at our website, edtechsr.com, where you can download a tiny MP3 or look at all the past links we've done on our show. Stay safe, stay savvy, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.